Hi, this is Sarah Crouch, and this is the first coach chat. The date is November 10th of 2013. And today we're going to be talking about a few things that I wrote down. And also, if you can look below the video screen, you should be able to see a chat section where you can answer any question that you would like, and I will go ahead and tackle those as well. First question we have here is from Libby. She says, what do you recommend for a training plan coming off of a tibia stress fracture and no running for 6 weeks? You know, it's interesting. I'm actually writing an article about coming back from stress fractures, and there's a lot to think about in terms of how to properly come back and what you're going to be dealing with. And I think one of the first things to talk about is going to be phantom pains. And stress fractures are kind of a notorious injury among runners, and phantom pains happen when you're running and you feel what feels like the stress fracture, but it's not. And it's also it's something about there's calcium buildup as well that can be an issue. So when coming back from a stress fracture, it's important to obviously you need to first be cleared by a doctor that you are safe to start running again. Again, a lot of stress fractures take between 6 to 8 weeks to heal. And if you're cleared to run, I think it's okay to start. It's really helpful if you've been running a lot beforehand to start back on maybe a day on, day off basis. And I recommend personally running on very soft surfaces. So you want to get in a shoe that has some cushion to it and get on a trail and start testing it out. And we will maybe start going, maybe 3 days on, 1 day off, like the next week, and from there start progressing. And as long as you seem to be healthy, then there should be no problem with that. And that actually leads me to what I wanted to talk about for one of my issues today, was that some of the most common injuries that I've noticed among people that I've coached, and as a runner myself, are hamstring strains, plantar fasciitis, and the runner's knee. And the one I want to talk about today is hamstring strains, and kind of how to avoid it and how to deal with it if you have one. So this is going to be kind of an interactive coach chat. So if you can right now, I want you to put your hands on your hips and feel around your lower back, and you will feel two bony protrusions above your tailbone. They should be right where your thumbs are. So if you can put your hand on those are called your posterior superior iliac crest. And that's just a fancy name for the top of your pelvis. And so if you, again, wrap your hands around to the front till you find the top of your hips, that is your anterior superior iliac crest, that top point of bone right there. So basically those 2 points should be parallel with each other and with the ground when you run. So let's imagine that your pelvis is a bowl, like this. So we'll take a bowl here, and if my thumbs are on the back of the pelvis and my hands are on the front, if you can imagine this bowl is filled to the brim with water, you should be able to run in such a way that you don't spill any water. But a lot of the time, for me especially, I know that when I tend to get tired, one thing that happens is I experience some anterior pelvic rotation, which would basically mean that water would be spilling over the front of the bowl. So if you can kind of imagine, let's see here. So if you put your hands on your hips, now imagine that you're running currently, and you would have the concept of tucking your hips up is something to think about, because what happens here is when you have your pelvis, when it tilts forward this way, everything that is attached to the back of it is being pulled forward. So your hamstrings, they attach to 2 points called your ischial tuberosity, or your sit bones. And when they are being pulled forward, the farther they are pulled, the tighter they get. And your hamstrings basically become just ticking time bombs. So basically you want to imagine that you are kind of reversing that process. And how you do that is by focusing on what causes anterior pelvic rotation. And the #1 cause of anterior pelvic rotation is tight hip flexors and quads. So today I want to show you an exercise that will help you loosen up your hip flexors. So I'm going to go ahead and scoot back here. And so let's see. You should be able to see kind of how I'm sitting. So you want to put this leg forward, so one leg forward, and we're going to be working on this hip flexor. So basically you want this knee at just slightly over 90 degrees, and then you're going to be leaning forward for about 3 seconds and pushing the same arm up over the side of the body and coming back. Now, you should be able to feel this right in here, right in your hip flexor. And you will maybe do that. I do it about 10 times in a row for about 2 to 3 seconds. And I do that before and after most of my runs because I'm someone who tends to deal with anterior pelvic rotation. So what that will do is it will loosen up the hip flexors. So if the hip flexors are what is pulling down, then you will start to correct that by having looser hip flexors. And it's also good when you're running to just be conscious of having your hips tucked up, of feeling like there could be, I've heard it like if there was a string attached to your hips and it is just going straight up through your body. And it can feel awkward at first to try and correct that, that aspect of your form. But I've noticed in my running in particular that it takes sometimes about 2 weeks or about 20 runs, whichever comes last, to really feel like you're adapting to a form change in a way that it feels natural and you don't have to consciously think about it while you're running. So that's kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about was hamstring strains. And then a second thing that I thought I'd discuss with you today is racing mentality for a 5K. And a 5K, it's one of my favorite events. I love it. And it depends what side you're coming at it from on how you look at it. Like, let's say you're a marathoner and you've run marathons for 10 or 15 years, and suddenly you decide, oh, I want to come down and race a 5K. A 5K will feel like a sprint to you. It'll feel very short. Whereas if you're maybe like a high school student who races the mile and the 2 mile, going up to the 5K seems like a very big jump, and 3.1 miles can seem just interminable. But I wanted to discuss kind of how I break down the 3.1 miles in my head when I'm racing it, and then give you kind of an example of a good 5K I've had and then a not so good 5K and what I could have done differently. So one of the best things a coach ever told me about a 5K, I asked him, I said, where should my thought process be as I attack this race? And he said, you know, I want you to run the first mile with your body, the second mile with your head, and the third mile with your heart. And so to explain that, the first mile, you cannot win a 5K in the first mile, but you can lose it there. I'm going to repeat that. You cannot win the first mile, or you cannot win a 5K in the first mile, but you can lose it in the first mile. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see among people that I coach and that I've noticed in my own running is in a 5K just going out really, really fast that first mile and then just blowing up and really struggling to make it home that last mile. And so one thing that I recommend to people is in running it with your body, you have to be aware of the fact that every single race I've been in, without fail, there are people that go out too fast. There are always just a herd of people that go out like they are Usain Bolt in a 100-meter sprint, and you have to be aware of that and not let that overcome you, because when you're standing on the starting line and your emotions are high and your adrenaline is flowing and you're thinking, I don't know what to do, they're going to all just blow past me, and then if you run that first 100 meters and you're just going and going and going, and then you realize, you know, shoot, this is way, way faster than I need to be. So when you're standing on that starting line, you remind yourself, okay, this is what's going to happen. The pace is going to go out too fast, and that's okay, because I am going to relax, I'm going to sit back, and I'm going to settle into a rhythm that I can maintain for the entire 5K. So the second mile, running it with your head, this is the part of the race that it can be really difficult to find a spot that you are well suited to, or to find maybe a group of people that is running the pace you want to run. For me personally, in a lot of races that I run, they have a start for the elite women before the rest of the group starts. And that can be difficult because I like to be able to be surrounded by a group of people that is running the pace that I am running. So I like races that is a mass start that I can run with a group of guys, you know, that's running the right pace. And during mile 2, when you're running and you're being able to think about, okay, what are my tactics? Am I in the right position right now? Could I be pushing harder? Should I back off? Those are the times, that is just the mental chess game of a 5K that you need to figure out, okay, am I in the right place or not? So the third mile, running it with your heart, that's pretty self-explanatory. You need to be able to it's going to hurt. I mean, you need to be able to come to terms with the fact that there will be pain from third mile to 5K if you're running it correctly. There always is. And I think it's also important to note that everyone is feeling the same pain that you are. It's easy sometimes when you're in a race to feel like, I am running with people, I am hurting so bad, I should just let them go. But when it's the last mile of a 5K, you can just pace that finish line and you think, okay, I can do this. You know, you got to remind yourself that the end is not that far away. And this is the time when I sometimes like to think about it this way. If you were running a race and you thought, okay, my hometown paper is going to run a news story about that race, what would I want them to say about this final mile? Would I want them to say that I backed off and I played it safe, or that I had guts and I went out there and I just went after it? And I think you always know the answer in your head is to keep pushing. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, there are just a handful of races out of hundreds of races that I've run that I've ever said, yeah, I gave everything I had. But you know, I think that it's important to know that you can always give a little bit more that last mile, and that's great. So we're going to go ahead and see if there's any more questions. I don't think we have any so far, but I was asked in the forum, I can't remember who asked me, but she said to tell the story of how I first started running. And it's a good one, but we'll get to that. I'm going to tell that one a little bit later on, I think, towards the end of the chat if we have time. So I want to talk about something that's a little bit, it's a little bit more of a serious topic. And I had a lot of emails in the past couple months, I've noticed, more so than usual, from a lot of runners, in particular women, but some men as well, who have written to tell me, you know, I'm training for this race. I'm training for a marathon, I'm training for a 10K, whatever, and I feel like I'd be a lot faster if I could only lose, you know, 5 or 10 pounds. And, you know, it's tough for me to tackle these questions because a lot of time, you know, when someone's running, in order to lose weight, yes, it's perfectly fine to run to want to take off 5 or 10 pounds, but there becomes a danger when you want to surpass your body's set point. And I'll explain that. Basically, for instance, me, I feel like my body frame, I am not meant to look like, you know, a 5'8", slender Kenyan runner. That's just not my build, and that's fine. I have a certain set point, and no matter how much mileage I'm running, that my shape is not going to change, and that's fine. I'm perfectly okay with that, you know. And I think the fallacy is that when people, for instance, watch the New York City Marathon, and they see someone like Priska Jeptu winning the marathon, and they think, oh my goodness, she weighs like 100 pounds. If I weighed 100 pounds, I'd be so much faster. And a lot of the time, that is not true, because what happens is, if your body is not meant to look like Priska Jeptu's, and you force it down to 100 pounds, you are not going to have the fuel storage that you need to be able to complete that race, you know, to complete a marathon or to train to your full potential. And the science that I've heard behind it is that when someone's body goes into that starvation mode, they have roughly 18 months to 2 years before their body crashes. They get injured or become chronically fatigued, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's also important to realize that we see, you know, the Kenyans, but there's also these, you know, wonderful Japanese marathon elite women who are short and stocky like me, and the Russian marathoners who often sometimes are pear-shaped. And one of the most beautiful things about running is that you can come from any background, any shape or size, and become successful at it for your own body weight, and that's great. So let's see, we've got a question here. Hi Sarah, I've been running for a couple of years now, but I'll be honest, I never did any strength training or even stretching. Can you recommend some good exercises as a starting point that I can add to my training regime? Thanks. Absolutely. When I first started running, one of the things that I really felt was misunderstood by the running community was strength training. And my first program, well, we had a coach in high school who, it was his first year coaching, and he wasn't really sure how to train us, so we would be running every other day and strength training on the days in between. And while I recommend far more running than strength training, I think there is a point to strength training. And what I recommend personally is your own body weight strength training. I do not do any lifting. I know runners who do, But I personally only do body weight training with my own weight. And the number one thing that I like to focus on is core, and I'll explain why core is so important to running, is because, so let's imagine here that I am running at the end of a race, and I have my arm carriage and my trunk rotation. If I am getting tired and my trunk is going like this, and my arms are crossing my midline, I am wasting a lot of energy going side to side rather than forwards. And when you focus on your core, in particular your transverse abdominals and obliques, you eliminate a lot of trunk rotation, a lot of that side-to-side movement, and you become a more efficient runner. So the number one exercise that I recommend to all runners is planks. I love planks. I do them every day, and they can help not only with strengthening all of the abdominal muscles, but by building resistance to muscle fatigue. So the general rule of thumb for planking is that you want to go, for me personally, I go a minute at a time, and I do that 5 times. But you don't want to go to the point where your arms are shaking and giving out. You know, you don't want to absolutely fatigue your muscles to the point of exhaustion. So I think that if you're just starting out with like a 30-second plank, and again, a plank is basically exactly what it sounds like. Arms on the ground. You can either have them bent at a 90-degree angle or straight out in front of you. And just your body as straight as possible. You don't want your butt in the air. You don't want to be sagging in the middle, just as straight as possible. It can really help to, if you have an extra pair of eyes, someone to tell you, you know, as you're getting tired, your stomach is starting to go down. You need to lift that up. So really focus, just like I talked about earlier, kind of if there was a string running through your body, that it would just be staying straight. So planks are awesome. I know a lot of runners who do push-ups. I am horrible at push-ups. My mom, she's a very good marathoner. She does, I think it's like 3 sets of 45 push-ups every other day, and she's just incredible. But so push-ups are another good one. But I also do a lot of just the general core stuff, planks, sit-ups, crunches, and as well as leg lifts. I find are very helpful. So let's see here. Can you suggest how to balance strength and cross training? I'm pretty sure that I need to keep those in there, but I'm short on time. Yeah, absolutely. What I would suggest for that is, it depends on how much you're running as well. I don't recommend cross training on the same day that you're running. I would do it, you know, like let's say you have, you're running 4 days a week. Then I would go maybe 4 days a week, cross training 2 days a week, and I would do strength training also 2 days a week, but 1 day that was with cross training and 1 day that was with a running day. So I would introduce it slowly if you haven't done it before. And in terms of cross training, I think the best thing to do if you want it to translate into running would be aqua jogging, hands down, if you have access to a pool. Aqua jogging is basically, you get in the deep end of the pool, you have a belt around your midsection, kind of a flotation belt, but not one that pops you up so far out of the water. You still want the water to be right up to here. And you basically just want to mimic your exact running form, focusing on a high knee drive. And it's great, especially if you're injured, because it is very low impact on the body. There is no, you know, you're obviously not having any contact with the ground or anything else. So aqua jogging is great. That's great cross training. Other than that, you know, elliptical is great. Biking is good. I've heard there's, you know, the kind of rough translation over is like 4 to 1 mileage. Like 4 miles on a bike equals 1 mile running, but I don't know if I really agree with that, especially if you're outside, because obviously your body can't coast the way a bike can. But I know a lot of runners who do both. Obviously, a lot of triathletes do all 3. But yeah, so cross training, strength training. I think the most important thing is you just don't want to overly fatigue your body, and I think you'll know when you're starting to hit that point. Like I'm coaching someone currently who, she's an awesome lifter. She lifts as well as runs, and she's come to a point where she's like, okay, I've had to choose to make running the priority. And I think it is important to decide, okay, if you want to implement a strength training routine, running still has to be the priority. And that will kind of help you be able to schedule in such a way that running comes first. So let's see here. Someone says the girl who won my last race was very short and stocky. I appreciate that. Okay. Okay. I don't think we have. Oh, can you recommend some good? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, to be specific regarding strength and cross training while running, is it better to replace a run with a cycle or add it in? Oh man. Okay. Well, that's tough. That's a tough one for someone like me who is running, over 100 miles a week. I simply do not have the capacity to add in, let's say, a 20-mile ride on Saturday if I want to. Let's say though that it is your down season, like you've just run a marathon and you're coming back maybe a month or two later, and you want to implement, a ride in there as well. I think at that point in time, it is perfectly fine to add in rides with your running. I think that's totally permissible as long as it's not. I recommend staying away from workout days, adding a ride into a running workout day, as well as the day before a workout day, as it will. You don't want to be any more fatigued than possible. The best time to add it in my opinion, would be in a section where you have maybe 2 to 3 easy days in a row. Stick it in the middle day there. So that way you can get your ride in, but also you're recovering on either side of it, because I think it takes a heavier toll on your body than you might realize. And I do have, I have a couple friends. There was a guy that I knew in college who he was running 120 miles a week, and he was also biking a lot because he was a triathlete. But he is the exception to the rule, and the most important thing is staying healthy, and you have to remember that. And it can be tempting to schedule it out, and on paper you're like, oh, this is where it works. I can get in this ride and do this, this, and that. But it's, in real life, it can be very challenging to have both a very successful, riding career and running career. And that's why, again, I have to emphasize the point that you need to make running your priority. So Mike has asked, when you start a new cycle for a particular race, how do you decide what goal time to shoot for? And also, do you adjust that goal time faster or slower based on how the training is progressing? Absolutely. That is a great question, Mike. And it depends on what you're training for as well. I think a lot of people on Runners Connect train for marathons. So a marathon is a good cycle to look at because there is a definite end point. There is the marathon. You say, okay, I have that marathon. I am 12 weeks out. I have this much time. Whereas if you're in like a track season like I have, there's many goals. You're having maybe 10 to 14 races a season, and you think, okay, well, which are the races that I want to peak for? So let's talk about the marathon first. So one thing that Jeff of Runners Connect recommends, and that I absolutely recommend, is having a tune-up race. I go about 6 weeks out. I know that he maybe likes a little longer, maybe 8 weeks out, usually a 10-mile or a half marathon race. And so I think that tune-up race can give you a great idea of where your fitness is at heading into that marathon. So in 2011, I ran New York, and it was actually only about a month out. It was about 4 weeks out that I raced a 10-mile. And at that point, it's really important to be able to have a race effort for 2 reasons. First of all, to really test your fitness, because it is hard when you're by yourself in practice, when you're working out by yourself. You never really know if you're pushing as hard as you can until you get into a race scenario where you have the chance to test yourself with people around you, with just all the emotions of race day. And that's the second reason why it's very important, is if you train a whole marathon cycle without getting in a race, then on race day, it can be just overwhelming. You could forget all the feelings that come back with race day, and having a race before that can get rid of some of those jitters, and I think that's really important. But let's say you set a goal for yourself. Let's say you want to hit a 4-hour marathon, and you go out there to run a half, and let's say you run 2 hours for the half, and you're not pleased, and that is not a point where I think you should give up on your marathon goal by any means. I think that especially if you're 6 to 8 weeks out, you think, okay, this is where my fitness is at right now, but I can see in my schedule that I have 10 more workouts, and I'm going to get faster. And it's also, I mean, a marathon is tough because in something like a 5K, when you're training for a 5K, it's easy to think, oh, I don't really need to set a goal time. I'm just going to go run as hard as I can for 3 miles. But in a marathon, you kind of have to set a goal, because if you get out there and you think, I'm just going to run as hard as I can, you will fade hard, and you will end up walking across that finish line unhappy. So it is really important to set a goal. And then, I can't remember what the second half of that question was. Do you adjust that time goal based on how the training is progressing? Yeah, especially if you encounter a hiccup in training. Especially, let's say you come across some plantar fasciitis that makes you miss 4 workouts. And you're still running, but you're like, okay, I don't want to go out running 4-hour pace if I'm really in shape to run 4:30 and end up blowing up and running 5 hours. So that's something that you should be able to always, always, always be in contact with your coach and say, this is the fitness I feel like I'm in. I'm a little worried. Can we talk about race strategy? And more often than not, this is what I recommend to my clients. If something like that happens in training, I say, okay, we're going to be conservative for the first, let's say 20K of the marathon. We're going to be conservative. We're going to stick at that slower pace, and then we are going to snowball. We're just going to roll it up for the rest of the marathon. And because it's always safer to aim for a negative split rather than to go out too hard and fall back. So Jennifer asks, how do you not go out too fast in races? I can't hit times in training. I can hit times in training, but I always fail in races. That is something, honestly, Jennifer, I think every runner struggles with that. And I got to tell you, I think it kind of is letting go of your pride. I don't know how else to say it, but going out to a race and being like, it's okay that people are going to go past me in the first mile. It's okay. I'm going to let them go because I know that they are going to come back to me in the last mile. And going out and being patient. And my mom used to do this in her marathons. She would write down her splits on her arm, and she would tell me, she's like, I'm going to be a slave to my splits. I'm not going to go out too fast. I'm not going to allow myself to go out too fast. And Jennifer, I don't know if you run with a Garmin or with any type of GPS watch. I don't personally, but a lot of races will have the mile markers anyways. But I think, when you're going out too fast. I think it's kind of obvious, that feeling of, for me, it's a sheer panic when I go out too fast. And I feel like I'm writing a check that my body is not going to be able to cash. So I can give you an example of this. There was a 5K that I ran last year. And this was a 5K that I ran a week after running a very, very hard 10-mile. And I was exhausted. But I thought, you know what? This 5K, because the year before I'd run 15:49 on this course. And I thought, I can do that again this year. I can do it. And the truth is my body was not ready to run that fast. So I went out guns blazing the first mile. I hit 4:57 for the first mile. And I knew I was in trouble. And from there, I was just moving backwards. And it was like, I ended up running I think it was 16:25 or something like that. I was over 30 seconds slower than where I wanted to be because I went out too fast. And so the way that you can kind of keep that in your mind is that I am willing to give up the first mile. I'm willing to give up being fast the first mile in order to be fast for my overall time. Because as I said earlier in my 5K talk, you cannot win a 5K in the first mile. You can only lose it. And so the 5K that I actually ran 15:49 on that course, I went out, I think that's about 5:04 pace. I went out in 5:08. I went out slower than my overall pace, and then my last mile was 4:56. I was able to really pick it up. And in a way, it's almost doing yourself a disservice when you go out too fast, because it can feel like, like I said, it's a mistake that I make, and I've raced hundreds of times. I don't know a single runner. I don't know a single runner that has not gone out too fast in one race or another, or even in most races rather than not. So that's something, it's just something that you have to also train your body on a daily basis. So one thing that I like to do is even runs like this morning, I just had a very easy, slow 10-mile run. But I always want to have my first mile be my slowest, and I want to just gradually, even if it's just 2 seconds a mile, gradually pick it up, and to the point where progression becomes second nature to your body, where you don't really have to think about it, you just do it. And it's much easier said than done, but the workouts that I find really help with that are cut-down workouts, which are basically like a tempo run, but you're starting off a little bit slower than tempo pace and finishing a little bit faster than tempo pace. Or a fast finish long run, where you're starting off at a very controlled rhythm for the first, 60% of your run, and then slowly cutting down from there. So that's kind of, I guess basically that's the way that I look at it, is that progression is a habit, and it's a hard one to form because it's all about patience. So I guess now, though I don't see any new questions, so I'll go ahead and tell the story of how I started running since, I think it was Teresa that asked, I'm not sure, but I think so. So when I was growing up, I grew up on kind of a farm, not really, but we had chickens, we had a goat, we had a llama, dogs and cats, and we lived out in the country. So the chickens that we had, my mom wanted to get chickens for the eggs. So we got chickens and one rooster, and this rooster was he was a nightmare. I hated him. And he he was very aggressive. He would run at you and he would peck at you and his wings would flap and he would like draw blood around your ankles if he got too close. So I avoided him like the plague. But one morning before school, I went out to the barn and to feed the goat and llama. And so I was feeding them and, you know, just patting the goat on the head, and I heard a rustling in the hay at the corner of the barn. And I look over, and there's the rooster, and he's just looking at me. And then he just raised one of his claws like this, and I knew that it was just on. So I just tore out of the barn. I took off running, and we lived on about a 3 to 4 acre property. And he followed me around. I was just all-out sprint, just as fast as I could run around the house, twice around the house, and the whole time he was flapping, and feathers were flying, and he was just going crazy, and he'd like 1 or 2 times he like actually nicked the bottom of my shoes, and I was screaming. And so finally, the second time around the house, I come around and I see the back porch door is open. So I just dove onto the back porch and I slammed the door, and I managed to lock him out. And so I went into the house, and my dad had been standing at the window watching the whole thing, and he was like, you know, I think I ought to sign you up for track. So that's basically how I started running. I was talent scouted by my dad, I guess. So David is asking, to follow on from Mike's question, how do you make sure your goals are realistic? I've just run a 3:30 marathon, and I'm finding it tough to set my next finish time. My next marathon isn't for 9 months, so how do I start to decide on a goal time so far out, or should I concentrate on a few weeks at a time? Thanks. I don't think you should decide on a goal right now. I mean, I certainly wouldn't, except for the fact that a PR is always a goal. It's always something to think about. But 9 months out is way too soon to say, this is the shape I'm in, especially if you're setting a time now, and that time becomes what influences your training. You want your training to influence your goal time rather than the other way around. Because 2 things can happen. If you set a goal time that is too slow, you do not train hard enough. If you set a goal time that is too fast, you train too hard and risk putting yourself into a fatigue cycle or becoming injured. So those are real issues. But when do I think it's right to set a goal time? I would say once, well, obviously you've run, you know, a marathon before, you have your 3:30 time. So right now, I think it's definitely okay to say, depending on how your last race went, to say, I want a PR. No matter what, I want to run faster than I ran my last marathon. Unless if the course is like, okay, I'm running a course at, you know, the base camp of Mount Everest, and it's at 10,000 feet and super hilly and covered in snow. Obviously, you're not going to run a PR, and that's fine. But if you're running on a course that is similar, and the last race went well, you felt like you did everything you could, you fueled correctly, you ran the race the right way, and it was all you could give on that day, then yes, say, I want to set a PR from that. But let's say that 3:30, you said, you know what, I really blew up that last 4 miles, and I could have ran 10 minutes faster. Then I'd set your next goal at breaking 3:20, you know, or saying I want a PR from what I think I could have ran that last race. And then as you start your marathon build-up, for me, my build-ups in the past have been about 12 weeks of real, I mean, obviously there's base training before that, but 12 weeks of marathon-specific training. And in that time, you know, it's okay to set a goal. Like, I'll be honest with you, New York did not go as well as I wanted. I went in with a goal of 2:35, and my coach, Pete, you know, we've done a lot of marathon-specific stuff, and he said, you know, I really feel like you are in 2:35 shape, and I agreed. I felt like I was, and at New York, I think I underestimated the course. I don't know if any of you have run it. I'm sure some of you have, but it's much more difficult than people give it credit for. It's fairly hilly. It's rolling through Brooklyn, and then you get a good stretch of flat ground, but coming over the Verrazano Narrow Bridge is where about the halfway point is, I think, if I remember correctly. And I hit that at about 1:18, and I was already off. I was at 2:36 pace. And the issue for me was that I ran completely by myself. And that's weird to think about when you see, you know, oh, a marathon on TV, it's this group of people, all you're running with wall-to-wall people the entire time. And for some reason, that's why I imagined it in my head. But they sent off a group of about 30 elite women a half an hour before everybody else. And so we strung out fairly quickly, and I ran the vast majority of the marathon completely alone. So that was really discouraging. And at that point, there will be times in the marathon where you have to reset your own goal. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to hit 2:35. I'm already exhausted, and I felt like I hit the wall at like mile 11. And you think, okay, I'm not going to hit my goal, but what can I do in order to run as fast as I can right now? And my thought at that point was, okay, I'm just going to count steps. I'm going to count to 600 steps, and I'll feel good at the end of 600 steps, and I'm not going to think about anything past that. And you just focus on little chunks of the marathon at that point. But that's, I mean, that's a whole other story, is resetting a goal during the actual race. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's something you have to be able to discuss with your coach and say, what kind of shape do you think that I'm in? Because it can be very misleading in your own training to either, you know, I think people tend to go one of two ways. They either tend to way overestimate themselves or way underestimate themselves. And I think most runners err on the side of underestimating themselves. And that's why sometimes I'm very hesitant to set a set-in-stone goal with people, because let's say you want to run 3:10, and you go out there and you run 3:10 pace, and you feel amazing through 16 miles, and you decide, okay, I can't go any faster because this is my goal pace. I never want that to be an issue. I want you to be able to give yourself room to grow and say, you know what, I'm going to blow my goal out of the water today, and to really surprise yourself. So that's one of the reasons that I tend to shy away from setting set-in-stone goals. One thing that we used to do in college is we would have a good goal, a great goal, and then a shoot for the stars goal, which was literally anything you want. For me, it was like, I want to make an Olympic team, you know, in 2012. And it didn't happen, but it's like, it's great to be able to train for something that is just the absolute peak of what you want to accomplish. I don't think I can say it enough that there's nothing wrong with shooting for the stars. So don't be afraid to set a great goal, but then also say, you know, yeah, I'm not going to go out like crazy, but if I'm feeling good at, you know, X amount of miles, at 20 miles, and I have only a 10K, and I know I can go for it, give yourself permission to move forward. Oh, Deborah. Hi, Deborah. Deborah is asking, what is the best advice for the older runner to stay injury-free? I don't have a long base of running, although it is deep and wide, and as far as fitness cardio is concerned. I feel like I am just chasing one injury after another. Is my ability impacted by the lack of a solid running base? Just started in 2011. And I guess the fact that my job has me sitting a lot doesn't help either. Deb, this is, I mean, it's a tough thing to talk about, like injuries, especially because it really does seem like, okay, some people are just injury prone and other people are not. For instance, my husband and I, Michael, he was a professional runner at That Fitness with me, one of the most injury-prone people I've ever met, and it's really unfortunate because he's very, very talented, but there are certain things, and like you, he was just chasing a different injury each time. It was either plantar fasciitis, calf strain, groin strain, you know, a sports hernia, and it can be, especially when you think, okay, I'm having all these different things go wrong, like what can I do? I have a couple things that I would advise for people who are injury-prone. And the first thing that I would advise is I cannot stress the importance enough of what you do immediately following your run is so important. So when I was at ZAP in North Carolina, we lived in the mountains, and we used to drive 20 minutes to our run and 20 minutes back. And for the first year I was there, I really did not understand how important it was to not just hop in a car and be sitting and be, you know, immobile just for 20 minutes after a run, and I would get out of the run and or get out of the car and I would be just stiff and sore, and I found myself taking a lot of time to recover from things. And I realized that when you, so for instance, Deb, you say that you sit a lot at your office. Okay, so when you're sitting, what happens? So imagine that your body is stretched out the way it is when it is running, and then like an accordion, it springs closed. Now those muscles are contracting. And what happens if they're contracting and then you immediately stand up, you get out of the car? It's like a rubber band that's been in the freezer. It's been cold for 20 minutes, and then you're stretching it again. Problems are going to happen. I had hamstring problems the entire time I was at ZAP, I think because of this very reason. So now one thing that I do when I'm done with runs simply holding onto like a fence post, or even, I don't know, I hold onto the dumpster outside my building, and I just swing my legs back and forth, 20 times each leg, and then I rotate and I do it from a different angle. So doing that, you have also about a 30-minute window to replace the glycogen that you've lost in the most effective way. So grabbing something with simple sugars can really help in the recovery process, help build up your muscles so that it reduces soreness and so that it prevents tearing. So something like, think simple sugars like a little thing of chocolate milk and a green apple. Something like that, something simple and short, have it in your car, or even, be able to carry it with you while you run if you run from home or something, or, just be able to replenish, and also hydration. You think about something like, okay, on kind of we're going to break it down on a scientific level here, hydration. So you need to be drinking a lot of water, and that's something that not a lot of runners do. I know I don't drink, nearly enough as I should. You need to be drinking a lot of water because the viscosity of your blood. Let's talk about that for a second. If your blood is thick and it's not able to move as efficiently through your muscles, it won't be able to carry that oxygen-rich blood through to help flush out the lactic acid that is making you sore, or that is preventing you from recovering from a workout. So things like that after your run are really important, as well as if you're finding yourself being injured and you're running like 6 or 7 days a week, maybe consider backing off to 4 or 5 days a week and supplementing one run with, like, I know, Deborah, you do aqua jogging. That's one thing that we work on, is like 60 minutes of aqua jogging. I think that is something that, to give your body just a break from the motion of running, because running it's a high impact sport. A little bit more than twice your body weight is coming back up through your shoes into your body every time you are taking a step, and that is, it takes a wear and tear. The fact that we're able to run the way we do is really a structural miracle. It's incredible, and you need to be able to take care of your body because of what you're putting it through. So let's see. Oh yeah, and Deborah says, I guess flying back to Houston after the half marathon wasn't too smart. No, but it wasn't really avoidable, and I found myself on cross-country plane flights that I'm just like, this is just the worst thing I could be doing right now. And even though it's sometimes awkward, get out of your chair, walk up and down the aisle a few times, whatever. You're never going to see those people again anyways, right? Okay, JC is asking, I'm still a bit confused about the warm-up for various training runs. One of the page links that Jeff provided talks about a 1 to 2 mile warm-up combined with dynamic exercises. I've been doing the dynamic exercise warm-up consistently for about a month now, and it feels great, but I am unsure of the mileage of easy jog with it, or strides, or whatever. Typically, I'm doing between half mile to 1 mile of easy jogging prior to the dynamic warm-up. Is the warm-up different for different types of training runs? Yes, absolutely. So, for instance, obviously when you have an easy day, there is no warm-up. You just hop out the door and you go. When you have a long run, there is no warm-up. When you have a day that is a tempo run, a fartlek, threshold intervals, anything that is a workout, there is a warm-up. Now, I'm going to let you in on something here. I do a workout routine before my races and before my workouts. My warm-up routine was actually, it's the same workout warm-up routine that Shalane Flanagan uses. So my coach at ZAP, he emailed her coach and was like, what do you do before, all of your workouts, before your races? And he heard back, and so that's the program that I implemented into my own training. And it's worked out really well. So what I do is I have a 3 mile warm-up before that. Shalane goes about 22 minutes. I go a little bit farther. I go about 24 minutes. I go at a pretty easy 8-minute pace. I also want to state right now that if you're someone who's running 20 to 30 miles a week, maybe you're not going to do a 3 mile warm-up. You don't want to put that extra strain on your body if you're not used to it. So you can shorten that to 2 miles or 1.5 miles. But anyway, so within that warm-up, there are 20-second surges, 8 20-second surges towards the end, maybe in the last half mile, just for about 20 seconds, I'll pick it up. And then I'll go back to that pace, and I'll pick it up, and I'll go back to that easy pace. For me, 8-minute pace, very, very easy. And then once I'm done, I do something called, as soon as I'm done with that the first part, the set warm-up, then I will stop and I will drink, some Gatorade or some water, swing out my legs back and forth. There's something I do called ankling, which I'm not sure if I can describe it really because I can't really run around in here, but it's basically, if you're running upright, imagine your feet as just like little paddles, and you're just using your feet to push off. You're not using your hamstrings. You're just using your ankles. That's the only thing that's rotating. Taking tiny little steps, about 30 of those, resting a little bit, about 30 more. Then doing some lateral side-to-side, swinging my arms, and my legs are going side-to-side down one side of the street for 20 to 30 steps, and down the other side of the street. There's a lot of drills that are really important for warming up all of your muscles, your stabilizers, as well as the muscles that you warmed up in that 3-mile piece. So and these drills, again, are something that if you're not used to them, don't just jump in and be like, oh, I'm going to throw in 15 minutes of drills before my next workout. If you've never done it before, it's really important to start off easy. And again, you can ask your coach, can you give me some beginning drills just to can you write me in just a little program of beginning drills that I could do before my workout. But anyway, so after that warm-up, I do strides. So obviously just accelerations. So I go about 20 seconds, and I'll do, lately I haven't been doing quite as many. I know that she does several, starting at marathon pace accelerations, building all the way up to mile pace. I think she does like 12 to 16 of those, quite a few, but I've been doing maybe 4 or 6. And then once my heart rate is back down to normal, then I will begin my actual workout. So the importance of the warm-up, why the warm-up exists, is for the same reason that I was talking about your muscles after a run, is if you were to just jump into, let's say you were doing mile repeats, and you were going to go hard for that first mile, if you're just to jump into that without being warmed up, it is pulling that rubber band without giving it some time to warm up from being in the freezer. And it can be really damaging to your body if you're not warmed up correctly to go ahead and do a workout. And some people have asked me about warm up before a marathon. That's a little bit different. I'll warm up, about 15 minutes of just easy jogging and then a few accelerations, because in a marathon, the first several miles are basically a warm up anyways. And that's how I feel about that. I know some people view it a little bit differently, but I feel like on a marathon day, kind of the less energy wasted, the better. And the reason for strides before an exercise is because if you're running that fast, it is a shock to your system. And when you get into strides that are the pace you're doing your workout at or faster, then it is no longer a shock to your system. You actually feel relaxed that first interval if you've gotten in some faster pieces before that. And again, warm-up, I found it varies from person to person. And I know people that do, there's some of my clients, I'll go maybe like a mile to a mile and a half warm-up, especially if it's something in different kinds of workouts. Like, let's say you have a fartlek run, which you're going to be running. Okay, I'm going to do, 10 by 1 minute on, 1 minute off, meaning I'm going to run hard for a minute, easy for a minute, hard for a minute, easy for a minute. That workout, I would not do as much of a dynamic warm-up. I would not do, the excessive drills and strides, especially so fartleks are something that are really a transitional workout to build you into harder workouts. And that's something that I've honestly just started to run, and I run for like 3 miles easy, and then without even stopping, I'll just transition into those harder pieces. So anything that's speed play like that, or just that's effort-based is something that is not quite as difficult. But the workouts that you really need to make sure that your body is warm for are the ones that are going to be threshold intervals, tempo runs, anything that's as fast or faster than race pace, for example. And so yeah, like I said, no warm-up for like a long run or anything like that. Aaron says that was an awesome description of a workout warm-up. Can you create an article with that? I'm a very visual learner. Yes, I will do that. I'll go ahead and list everything that I do. And also, one thing that's interesting is in the article, or not in the article, in the information that I got from Shalane's coach about the day of a workout, it even went into detail about what she ate the morning of a workout. For instance, she would have like a piece of toast, half an egg, and tea, like 2.5 hours out or something like that. And so I'll go ahead and include that as well, because it's, it can be challenging sometimes, especially on a workout day when you don't want to upset your stomach and you think, okay, what can I eat that's not going to like push me over the edge? And honestly, a lot of that is trial and error. And my #1 advice is don't try anything new. If it's a race day or a workout day, that is not the time to be like, oh, so-and-so recommended cranberry juice. I'm going to chug a gallon of cranberry juice and see if that helps my workout. Probably not a good idea. My husband had a friend in college who heard that baking soda, a teaspoon of baking soda would help during the workout, like relieve pain. So he ate a lot of baking soda and ended up being taken to the hospital after his workout for, I think he had to get his stomach pumped, which is pretty terrible. So don't try anything new on a workout day. And hi, Sarah. My name is pronounced Joshua. I never knew that. I've been pronouncing it wrong this whole time. So the spelling is kind of funky. Before I joined Runners Connect, I trained for my first 2 marathons using a run-walk method. I have slowly built up to 11 miles without a run-walk, but just feel so much more drained and sore afterwards than when I was using that method. What do you think of using run-walk and also its impact on recovery? Do real runners think it's cheating? Okay, so the interesting thing is this, and I think it's Deborah actually who did the run-walk method and ran a 3:39 marathon. So indeed, real runners do use run-walk method, and I think her ratio was 9-to-1, 9 minutes of running, 1 minute of walking. And you know, Jeff and I have talked about that's one thing that I would like to write an article on as well. I've never used it personally, but I would absolutely recommend it for someone who is either just starting in running or for someone who finds it more successful than just the run method. And the reason that I think it can be a great tool is, for instance, like let's talk about Deborah's marathon. When she ran 9 minutes of running, 1 minute of walking, that 1 minute of walking provides both a mental and a physical break from the rigors of running a marathon. So the reason that I personally don't think I would use it is because for me, if I were to stop after 9 minutes of running and walk, I would find it really difficult to start up at that same pace again. And I know that maybe some people it can really work for. Yes, Deborah is affirming that it was a 9-to-1 ratio. So I would find it personally very difficult to bounce back from that minute of walking and to mentally get myself engaged in that. But that to me is like, that is a mental weakness on my side. So if I think that a way to look at it, the way that Deborah did it, is by saying, okay, I'm going to just focus on this 9-minute chunk of running, and then I get a minute of walking, and that's great. You know, whereas for me, I'd feel like I would focus on it, the negative aspect, saying, oh shoot, I'm walking for a minute, this is breaking up my stride, this is breaking up, you know, my momentum and my rhythm. So I think that's a case-by-case scenario. It can really just go either way. But yeah, I would absolutely recommend it. And I wouldn't start at a 9-to-1 ratio. If you're someone who's just beginning running or someone who wants to, you know, ease back into a training cycle, I would maybe start with 4-to-1 or even 3-to-1, you know, on a daily basis. Like if you say, I want to go, you know, 30 minutes and I want to run 3 minutes and walk a minute, or I guess it would be 32 minutes if you're going to do it that way. 3 minutes of running and walk a minute. Or, you know, something that I've even had people do in the past when if you're a beginning runner and running is really just a chore, it is a pain, it is a punishment, one way to make it fun would be like, okay, I'm going to run until I hit a blue mailbox and then I'm going to walk. Or I'm going to run until I, you know, finish, or until I see, you know, the shadow of a tree. Or just something fun that'll keep you, you know, you run and then you walk for a little while, and not even setting it as a set time. Maybe just letting your watch run and then running when you feel like running, and then, you know, backing off for a little ways and running again. I've done even workouts that way where my coach Pete, he told me it was the week before race, and he said, I want you to do a fartlek run, 12 minutes worth of fast running, but you can divide it up however you want. And so I was on a path where it was fall time and there was a lot of trees heading over, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to run fast from red tree to red tree, and then I'll run easy until I hit another red tree. And it was just something fun to do. So I think that it's also, the run walk can help make running not such a burden, to be honest. You know, and then eventually, of course, you want to break that ratio down. And as I was thinking about Deborah's next marathon, and how I think for Deborah, I feel like a good ratio would maybe be 11 or 12-to-1. You know, because that is it's a manageable chunk of time, but you're also getting that walk in. So what you can do in order to eliminate is you can either cut down the time that you're walking or improve the time that you're running, or both. So for someone who, let's say, is starting out running a run walk at 3 minutes running, 2 minutes walking, maybe they could cut it down to a minute and a half walking, you know, or something like that. It's kind of a fun thing. It's something you can play with, you know. So Joshua says, to follow up on that run walk, would it make sense to do the shorter workouts, hills, tempos, etc., as is, and then the weekly long run with the run walk method? Absolutely. So especially something like hills. Normally when you're doing hills, it's a short burst of speed. Hills are basically the running equivalent of squats. It's just basically a lifting workout for your legs while you're running. And it's usually you're not going to be doing, a 10-minute hill. And so I think that that's an important time to choose to focus just on running. Whereas like a long run would be the perfect time to get down that run-walk method, especially if you're going to be using it for a marathon race, because then your body becomes accustomed to that and used to it, Fernando says he is doing hill workout this Tuesday. Is there a suggested angle of the hill that I should use for my workout? It's tough. For hills especially, it depends on where you live and what you have to work with. I've done some stuff on a treadmill, and for me, I've never gone over a 4% grade. I find that very challenging. And although I do find it easier to run outside than on a treadmill, but if you have a hill by your house that is, again, it depends what you're doing. If you're doing like, okay, I'm doing like 30-second hill repeats, and it's just all out as hard as I can up the steepest hill I can find, that's great. Find a really steep hill. But if you're doing something that's like, okay, I'm going to do a hill workout of 3 minutes up and then, a walk back down, then you're not going to want to find something so steep. And I think the best way to do this is kind of trial and error. Find a hill, try a repeat on it, and see if it works. Because hills, it's interesting. At a certain point, they obviously become counterproductive if you're not even able to run up them. It's about finding that perfect kind of angle that you're able to run quickly enough up that you're getting that muscle memory, that you're getting that turnover in your legs, but also that you are able to recover when you come back down. Because if the hill is too steep, you don't want to, you're not going to be able to run nearly at the pace that you need to be running. So I don't know. Fernando, it depends. If you live in a place that's very hilly, then I would just say find one that suits your needs. Try a repeat on it. And a general rule of thumb, I guess, is if you're doing, let's say, 10 repeats at like a minute and a half per repeat, you want to feel good. Like you can keep going through about halfway, and then the second half of that workout should be like, okay, this is starting. I'm pushing, but I can finish. And if you're feeling the very first repeat, if you're feeling like I just can't, then okay, maybe look for another hill. And again, if you want to do it on a treadmill, that's fine too. I know a lot of people who run almost every treadmill run at like a 1% incline. But yeah, like I said, I've done hill work on treadmills, and I've never gone over 4%. And I don't think I would. I think outdoors I've gone maybe about up to 6%, but I would not suggest. I don't know. It depends, and maybe your coach would differ with me, but I don't think I'd go much higher than that. So it looks like we are rounding up to the 3 o'clock hour, so I think I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I don't know. Next weekend I'm actually racing Big Sur, so I will not be on next Sunday, but I'll probably check in with you guys before that. So I believe, so I'll be racing the Big Sur. Oh, we got one more question. Okay. What is the toughest thing to transition from marathon distance to ultramarathon distance and the training? I'm thinking of looking at a 50K or a 50-mile race as my next big challenge, and I'm a little apprehensive about the additional training. Okay, great question to wrap up. So my mom is a good example of this. She ran several marathons, and then she decided, I want to move up. I want to run a 50K. How do I do this successfully? So she started going. So in a marathon, a lot of times you won't run over 20 to 25 miles during a long run. I suggest going over distance. And I know this sounds crazy, but you want to go over a marathon distance in your training if you want to run a 50K, obviously. So my mom, for instance, she would go for 28 to 30-mile long runs. And it was weird. She had a friend who worked day shift, and they would go running, she would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and meet up with her friend, and they would go for these 30-mile runs in the woods at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm running her a little bit crazy. But, I think that it's really important to understand the fact that you're going to have to put in a little bit more mileage, but it's not going to be crazy, especially if it's a 50K. A 50K is, it's a fair amount more, but it's not going to be like, okay, I got to go out and run, a 50-mile day. It's not going to be something that is, thanks, guys. But it's not going to be something that you're going to have to completely alter your training schedule, especially if you've been training for a marathon. You will still have let's say you're running, 5 days a week in preparation for this marathon, I would suggest maybe going to 6 for the ultra marathon. And if you're putting in, let's say, 60 miles a week running for a marathon, maybe bump up to like 80 or 90. But again, do it safely. Talk to your coach about that. So I don't know if we have time for any more, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off. But it was great. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Go ahead and leave your feedback or anything, what you thought on the Runners Connect stream, and I will catch up with you guys there. Bye.